Hello everyone, come on in, please take a seat. I'm the Blue Book and I hope you're having a fantastic day, or at the very least, a tolerable one. If you're new here, let me catch you up. I read books, I do art, and here I combine my two passions and tell you my thoughts on what I read, and try to pass it off as an actual review. Now, this feels like a book that should be read and reviewed during winter. And guys, it has been blisteringly hot over here. Except not this week because there has been a hurricane going on. Lucky me, I suppose. Cause yeah, the hurricane's dangerous, but the weather's nice. Today we're reading The Golden Compass. I read The Golden Compass a few years back. I jumped the whole thing in about 4 or 5 days. And I had a swell time reading it. But even so, I never got to the rest of the books, even when I bought them all, because according to me, I was going to read them all. And so they've been gathering dust. I don't think you can see them in the frame. But they've been gathering dust since 2020. I think. I'm not sure. The box is dusty, but again, I haven't touched them since I bought them. But a friend and I were looking for something to read together and his Dark Materials popped up, so here we are. I think reading with people or just having someone to chat with about the story and the characters really makes the experience more enjoyable. And I bring this up because I think I had a better time reading The Golden Compass this time around than the first time. So yeah, hopefully you'll see the reviews for the rest of the series soonish. Either way, fingers crossed. The Golden Compass was written by Philip Pullman and published in 1995, just a year shy of when I was born. It was originally released under the name Northern Lights, but was changed to Golden Compass for American audiences for some fucking reason. It's the first book in the series of his Dark Materials, which contains 3 books, and has been wildly beloved since its publication. This is the story of Lyra Vlaqua, a wild, willed child who was raised in a male college in a universe parallel from her own. In this world, all humans possess a creature called a demon, which, if I understood correctly, it's the physical manifestation of each person's soul. This book takes us along with Lyra when her world gets turned upside down, when her friend Roger goes missing. She must journey to the Arctic in search for him and her imprisoned uncle, Lord Asriel. He is a man who's been conducting experiments on something that is considered taboo to investigate on, called dust. That's the general gist of it, but here are some extra tidbits that I think are relevant to the story. There is a group of people called the Gobblers, who are mostly considered to be an urban legend until, you know, they start taking children in London. I think I'm missing some water. Lyra's life first gets disrupted by the disappearance of her friend, yes, but also by the coming of Miss Coulter, a very successful and influential woman who thinks it's the right time for Lyra to get a proper education and also more feminine company. There is a group of people called Egyptians, who are loosely inspired on the Romani. They live in boats and come and go with the seasons. They end up helping Lyra escape from the Gobblers and go north. They are the ones who suffer the most from the taking of the children because, well, no one cares for the woes of the Egyptians. And the Gobblers know this. When they reach the beginning of the Arctic on their way to rescue all of the taken children, they are met with a drunken warrior bear and an aeronaut, which It's basically a man who conducts a hot air balloon. He also joins the gang, not for any noble reasons, but because it's a job. He's a man for hire. To his credit, he's a very loyal man. If you've read this book before, maybe this question has crossed your mind. Who is this for? Like, seriously, what's the target demographic for The Golden Compass? The Golden Compass is a whimsical adventure with a chosen one protagonist. It focuses on her perspective of the world and her childish adventures. But ever so often, in-depth discussions on religion happen, or the guilt religion gives you about sexual desire. Sometimes there are graphic descriptions of someone's jaw being torn from their face and the subsequent blood splatter. And there is one very specific scene at the end of the book, which we'll discuss later. But when I tell you it was a very sexual scene without actually being sexual, I really mean that. The book often talks about science that an adult might get, but not a kid. And well, for kids, you don't really need to understand about the science, because when kids read these books, they're often like Lyra, and all the science is just jargon. And even at my age, there were a lot of things that I didn't understand, and not because it was made up jargon, but because it was actual complex explanations on things. But either way, the fact still stands that the things inside of this book are complex. In my mind, there is no actual question for who this book was made for. This was a book made for children and young teens. And I think I've mentioned this in another one of my videos. This is one of the things that I love the most about reading children's books, when they include more mature themes and topics that adults might not think that children are ready for, or just things of a darker nature. I also don't think people give enough credit to how much children can actually understand. They are perceptive little critters, and they should be allowed to make their own opinions on things that are not all good and purified. And hey, a lot of the times, if not most of the times, they do miss the darker tones in stories. But that's just my opinion. I'm not a mother, so what do I know? All I'm saying is that I like it when children's books have a darker tone and don't shy away from more mature topics. I keep thinking that the art I do for these videos should be simpler and more manageable. Maybe just sticking to fun character designs and not full-blown out scenes. But the brain monkeys won't leave me alone, so instead of doing a couple of character designs like I wanted to, I'm going to paint a landscape. I will be using gouache paints for this piece, which I absolutely adore, but that said, I'm not really an expert, so the anxiety will be with me throughout the process. The Golden Compass is separated into 3 sections. Part 1, Oxford, which tells of Lyra's life at Jordan College, her months with Miss Coulter, and the beginning of her journey with the Egyptian people. Part 2, Volvangar, the journey to the north, the meeting of the bear, York Burnison, and Lyra's stay and escape from the experimental facility of the Oblation Board, who are the people kidnapping children. And Part 3, Svalbard, which closes the story when they get to the land of the warrior bears, with Lyra finally finding her father, and the grand, painful conclusion. These scenes I'm painting happens in the third part at the beginning of Svalbard. When I read this part, as they ascend to the clouds, so high up they break through completely and they see the aurora in all its splendor and the witches fly beside them, it definitely left an impression on me. It just seemed like such a wonderful scene. I had a little hard time figuring out from what perspective I wanted to do it, because doing the aurora against a dark background would have been easier, but the book describes that they see the clouds beneath them like a solid sheet of ice, with the exception of some mountain peaks here and there. And I really wanted to keep that image in. Let's talk about our main girl, Lyra. She's a rowdy, wild child, and the men at the college are too busy with their studies and scholarly things to care too much about the fact that she gets constantly in fights with other children of the neighboring colleges and the passing Egyptians. She's very bratty and irreverent, and you can just feel it in the text. This is how children are in their minds. She's very imperious about herself and how she views others in her mind. Lyra, with her friends and so-called enemies, likes to tell grand tales of things she hears at the college, or the things that her great uncle, Lord Asriel, gets around to do when he's away, exploring far-off places. She makes wild, exaggerated stories about these events and has all the children eating from the palm of her hand. Lyra lies a lot, like a lot. It's a little impressive. And when it's time to fight, Lord, is she down to fight. I didn't super like her at the beginning, but in retrospect, I have to say I do see myself in her when I was a kid. I wasn't violent per se, but I was very rough with how I played, just out of the excitement of it. And I also made up stories of things that never happened, or exaggerated the truth when I was quite young. But only with kids. Lying to adults made me feel guilty to the bone. So I think it's not really a malicious lying, this thing that Lyra does. But I'm not sure how to explain the logic behind it. I can just relate that I did that myself. But I think in Lyra, it shows the beginnings of leadership, that she can be followed, and people want to follow her. Well, at this point in time, at least children do. And just on a brief note, I can't get too much into it, but I absolutely adore the men of Jordan College that take care of Lyra. They care for her so much, but they just don't really know how to raise a child, and often teach her about topics of their fields, and not the basics that she actually needs. I am now done with the background of this art, and I must leave this thing to dry for a good long while, unless I want all of my efforts to go down the drain. I don't usually practice when I do these things. Perhaps just a quick doodle of how things might be positioned. But I was not confident about how I was going to do this. So I did have to practice a lot first to figure stuff out. And on the topic of Lyra, let's talk about Pantalaimon. Pan is her demon, and we can usually see him turning into an ermine, a mouse, or a wild cat. But it is noted that amongst the other children's demons, he's the one who has the most imagination for change. It is noticeable that he does change more than the other demons do. And small parenthesis, but I don't think I ever mentioned this, but it's important to the plot. When you're a kid, your demon changes shape, and as you grow older, your demon settles into one specific animal shape that's representative of who you are as a person. I think it's kind of important to the book, and I just went over my mind. While I read Pan, I perceived him most of the time as being Lyra's consciousness. He's always telling her off when she's doing something she shouldn't, or warning her about the dangers of doing such and such thing. But Pan does have his own brand of wildness to him, just like Lyra. And I don't know if that's specific to all demons or just because Lyra is Lyra and she's a little feral. And while I mostly read him as Lyra's consciousness, I did also read him as her inner voice, how one can go back and forth with one's own self to make decisions. And also I sometimes read him as Lyra's inner desires. Maybe things that she wants to do but doesn't do for some reason. So yeah, my understanding of the demons was they are your own consciousness, your inner desires sometimes, and well, your inner voice. It's versatile. I think I'll discover more about the nature of demons as I read along, but for now, that's what I got. There is this specific moment where Lyra is very afraid to approach the very Yorick, and Pan forces her to take the first steps. In the world of his dark materials, being separated from your demon is extremely painful in soul and physically. A demon can never be more than a few meters away, and even small distances may cause discomfort. In this part, Lyra is on her own and she must convince Yorick to join them, but she's alone and very afraid. So Pan goes to the bear against Lyra's wishes until it turns so painful that Lyra is forced to run to Pan. This thing about the distance between a demon and their person, it's very interesting to me. When they reunite, there's this deep desperation to be together again. Fascinating stuff to read. Hey, let's take a little detour from the art I'm currently making to the Saint Serafina Pekkala. I had a very specific look in mind for her, and I did a few sketches first to get the feel of it and be ready. And then I tried to start drawing. And then I tried again. And another time. And golly gee, one more. Before I knew it, my little detour had turned to a bit of a nightmare, so I had to take a break. I ate some cake, got some coffee. Let's try again. But on a new page, because the last one was absolutely disgusting with old lines. I originally wanted to do the signs for both her and Father Quorum, because I remembered I loved them from the first time I read the book. But that didn't stick in the end. Let's talk about these two. There's really not much about them or their time together in the book, but the crumbs we do get are fantastic, in my opinion. We're first introduced to Father Quorum as a wise old Egyptian, and how he has connections to the witches, because once he saved a witch that had fallen from the sky from drowning. And so we get all these little hints of his relationship to the witches, and how they respect him for saving one of their own. These hints eventually lead to the reveal that Serafina and Father were more than just good friends at one point, but lovers, and lived together and even had a kid. The story about them just makes me go wide-eyed, just wondering what happened, about their lives, about their time together.
Oh no! Hey, look at my nails. They're shiny.
At the time Golden Compass takes place, Serafina and Farther haven't spoken in decades. We discover later, when Lyra asks Serafina, of all the complex reasons why Serafina hasn't gone back to see him. Out of pain for the death of their young son, respect for Farther because he wouldn't want Serafina, an ever-young witch, to see how old and unpleasant time has turned him. There's a lot there to be explored, and I won't go more into it because this video, I suspect, will be long enough already. I realized too late that there's an actual description of Serafina's eye color, and it's not blue, it's green. I originally wanted to make her eyes green, but I thought, that's very cliché of a witch, so I'm not going to do them green. But then I was rereading some parts and her eyes are actually green, so I went back to fix that. And then, as I was going back to fix that and reading that bit again, I realized that she's wearing a crown of red flowers, and I also didn't account for that, so I went back and put those in. But at first, I didn't read that correctly and I just thought it was like a necklace. So I did a necklace first. This is live footage of me as I realized that her snow geese is not brown but gray, like texturally, and that's not something I can fix, so yeah. And on the topic of Farther Quorum and witches, holy moly, these groups of people are amazing! Every time something was revealed about either of these groups, I had my eyes peeled. The Egyptians are greatly marginalized and shunned from almost all places. At the beginning of the book, we're only shown small glimpses of their microculture. But when we get to their gathering and we realize just how many Egyptians there actually are, their world opens up for us. Like how most of the Egyptians have bird demons of their life in the fern places and on boats, and also about their council and how their community works. They are complex people, because all peoples are. I adore most of the Egyptians that we get to spend time with. Wise and steadfast Farther Quorum, who has a hard time walking. Protective matron and basically royalty of the Egyptians, Ma Costa. And fair, energetic big man that is Lord John Fa. These were characters I always enjoyed having on page, and every time they interacted with Lyra. Then there are the witches. I love the witches so much. They are so different from the rest of the people we get to know in the Golden Compass. They can live for thousands of years. Only women can be witches, and when they have sons, they'll just be regular humans. Their demons, unlike everyone else's, can go far away without consequences. Which I would like to note in the book, when people see these, when they see a demon without their human or vice versa, they feel like genuine disgust. And the demons of regular people, they have to look away as if it were rude to look at a demon without its human. The witches also seem to have different concepts on how the world works and morality, which I found incredibly fascinating. Two very important characters that are literally hunting the narrative while they're not on page, are Lord Asriel and Miss Coulter. They are probably the characters who fascinated me the most. Lord Asriel has this sort of mysticism to him, like he's a legend or a myth in Lyra's mind. And I also got this perception of him like he's a dangerous animal, and the only thing holding him back from being completely feral is just skin, and that danger is hiding right beneath it. I wanted to like him so much because of just how much Lyra admires him and wants his love. But it's not just Lyra. Almost everyone we meet has respect for him or grand tales to tell about him. And while he is a sort of black sheep in the scholarly community and the church, they also respect him a lot. And the Egyptians, again, they also respect him. I don't quite remember what he did for them, but even though I wanted to very much, I couldn't quite fall in love with him. Like I said, this is a book that I had already read, and while I couldn't remember exactly why, I knew that I couldn't trust him 100%, and that he was going to do something terrible. And while I couldn't remember, I kept thinking, maybe it wasn't that terrible. Like trying to convince myself, like, maybe I'm misremembering and what he did is not that bad. But we'll talk more about his horrible actions later on. As for Miss Coulter, she's described as a wonderful woman of immense beauty and influence. She has a way with words that just draws everyone to her. How I read her was that she has such a way with words that she can get you to do anything that she wants, and you won't even realize that it wasn't your idea because of just how cunning she is. Which, honestly, it's a trait that she shares with Lord Asriel. He also has a way with words, but less subtle, let's say. She too, just like Lord Asriel, has a dangerous side to her. While most of the time she's graceful and calm and collected, there is this quiet rage inside of her. Which, you know, quiet rage is such a women thing to have. Like, I read that and I thought, yes. I don't know, I just think having this kind of rage is very women-like. And I think sometimes it feels more dangerous because it builds up, you know? If you're a woman, you know that it builds up. Miss Coulter is a woman that has been searching for power her entire life, and she has found it just in the right places. Not with the restrictions of being a nun or by marrying wealthy, which she did, but by carving her own place in society, and I would say being almost indispensable. She is ambitious and it shows. But some things must be sacrificed to gain this power, be it morality or love or a child. Beware, traveler, here be spoilers. Eventually, and honestly, sort of early on, it is revealed to us that these two are Lyra's parents. Born out of wedlock, Lyra's birth was messy, and it ended with the death of Miss Coulter's husband. And that is one of the many reasons why her parentage is hidden from her. Just a very messy affair all in all. And, you know, because it's an actual affair that Asriel and Miss Coulter were having. But if there is one thing I really enjoyed about reading Golden Compass, was just how much Lord Asriel and Miss Coulter shined through Lyra. Now, that may not always be a good thing, considering they're both horrible people, but I did love to see it. There are times where Lyra goes a little feral in her anger. She gets righteous and unshy and ireful when certain things happen. And I can so clearly see Lord Asriel there, with his unwillingness to budge on things, and dangerous animal anger. There is one point where Lyra gets angry. Some very well-earned anger, I have to say, and as a mirror of her anger, her demon Pan turns into a snow leopard, which is the exact same demon that Lord Asriel has, further showing how she can sometimes be her father's daughter. On the other hand, there are a lot of times where Lyra gets very subtly manipulative. For me, this is an extension of her telling lies and tales to the kids she used to play with. This shows the cunningness of Miss Coulter. Lyra's manipulation and way with words helps her get information out of people, or keep her hidden from danger, or even having a creature of power, like the Bear King, Jofur Ragnisson, basically eating from the palm of her hand. Her parents are so perfectly reflected in her, and it's amazing to see, and at least to me, the inkling of how she could turn out to be if she's not careful. Also, I noticed this thing about both Lyra and Miss Coulter, like they're strangely magnetic. It's not just that they are good with words, but almost like they have an alluring aura that draws people to them. With Miss Coulter, it almost sounds like hypnosis when she's luring children to her. It's very strange and interesting, and I wonder if there's more to that than just being cunning. It sounded supernatural to me, it's all I'm saying. Alright, hard spoilers now, I'm jumping to the very end. At the last 2-3 chapters, I began to feeling this mounting dread that something awful was going to happen, but I just didn't know what. It was the PTSD from the first time I read it, let me tell you. Long story short, after Lyra manages to save Roger from being experimented on and a bunch of other things, and she thinks that she's safe with her father, Lord Asriel kidnaps her friend and takes him to the peak of a mountain. And Lyra gets there and saves him, and I was like, oh, what a relief. I had thought that my dread was because the first time I read it, he had died and I just couldn't remember. Only actually no, because Lord Asriel's demon chomps on Roger's demon, and that poor boy dies in Lyra's arm from 1 second to the next, and I'm like, excuse me? And not to mention that if Roger hadn't been there, Asriel would have used Lyra for his experiment instead. And that is not me inferring things, it is literally in the text. Long story short, this madman is making a bridge into the sky to get into another world, and he manages it by killing a child. What a life! Small parenthesis here, but I do have a whole rant about how Miss Coulter and Lord Asriel do really love Lyra in their own twisted way, but we don't actually have time to get into that. Miss Coulter arrives then, kind of wanting to stop Lord Asriel, kind of wanting to join him, and this is the part which I was referring to earlier. As Miss Coulter and Asriel reunite, so do their demons. And then the most absurdly, extremely and explicitly sexual moment without actually being sexual happened. And I will be reading it to you so you can tell me your opinion. You know, just so you can tell me if I'm smoking marijuana or not. I'll skip some of the parts that don't involve the demons for brevity's sake. Also, because I never mentioned it, Miss Coulter's demon is a monkey. The monkey's tail was erect. The snow leopards swept powerfully from side to side. Then the monkey reached out a tentative paw. The leopard lowered her head with a graceful, sensual acknowledgement. They touched. And then, this is referring to Lord Asriel and Miss Coulter. His hands, still clasping her head, tensed suddenly and drew her towards him in a passionate kiss. Lyra thought it seemed more like cruelty than love, and looked at their demons. to see a strange sight. The snow leopard, tense, crouching with her claws just pressing into the golden monkey's flesh, and the monkey relaxed, blissful, swooning in the snow. Talking about Miss Coulter and Lord Asriel again. And their mouths were fastened together with a powerful greed. Their demons were playing fiercely. The snow leopard rolled over her back, and the monkey racked her claws in the soft fur of her neck, and she growled a deep rumble of pleasure. Anyway, all of this is happening while, Lyra is holding Roger's dead body in her arms. But hey, if you didn't caught it because of the way I read it, let me tell you, Lord Asriel's demon was sinking its claws into the monkey, and the monkey was enjoying it. Then the monkey was sort of like not choking the leopard, but like digging his fingers into her neck, and the leopard was happy about it. Do you see what I mean? But hey, maybe it's just me. I don't know what sort of masosadistic thing their two demons have going on, but I am sure it reflects on Lord Asriel's and Miss Coulter's relationship perfectly. What an ending for a children's book. 10 out of 10. That felt like my face was going pretty intense. I hope my inner demons aren't, showing. Despite the length of this review and how much I enjoyed my time reading the book, I don't feel like I liked it enough, if that makes sense. I did like it, and I think you can tell that by the review, but it was also okay, in a sense. Which, I don't know, it feels a little weird with me having so much to say about it. But I will most definitely continue with the other books. I wanted to clarify that even though I have a lot of good things to say about it, I'm not super attached to it. And that's it, I guess. Next time you see my face, we'll be talking about our Lord and Savior, Steve the King. Kidding, my only Lord and Savior is actually Neil Gaiman. No, but we will be talking about Stephen King. That or Subtle Knife, the sequel of this book. Whichever happens first, But hey, if you have a preference for Stephen King or The Golden Compass, let me know and I'll try and do my best to get that review out first. Do let me know if I'm missing something. I am only human and my mind is very dispersed. I often don't get to see the full picture of things. Let me know if I missed something. But this does get 4 stars from me because I did enjoy myself. I don't know, guys, just my feelings about the book are a little weird. Until then, though, I can't have concrete ideas. Articulating them? Impossible. But I will keep on trying my best. See you soon, hopefully.